But what really shook me at one time, and I was actually already teaching it, was when this happened to me. Everybody knows what this is, right? It's a brain. And I was in the cadaver lab over there, already teaching, and the student wanted to dissect, or these students wanted to dissect, which I hope we can do a little bit. There's chairs over here. You just have to kind of take one and move it somewhere and sit down and go figure it out. And she got stuck in the brain, and Doc, you gotta come help me. And I'm like, okay. So she had the skull plate taken off, and I started reaching into the head and started pulling on that. I've never taken a brain apart. I didn't know how to do that. I'm a chiropractor, and I teach anatomy, which is what I like to do, but I'm not necessarily going to the lab and dissecting all day long. And I started pulling on that thing, and it made these weird sounds, and by the time the sounds were like, all the students left the room, and I was by myself because they couldn't handle it anymore, and I was started to sweat, and I ended up with this thing in my head. And of course, didn't have a spinal cord on it at that point. It's severed there. And I was like, what was pulling was the matter, the dura mater that attaches to the skull and how it's anchored and so forth, which we'll go through later. But it sort of freaked me out a little bit. And I was like, whoa, I have this thing in one hand, and I'm the first guy or person that holds this person's brain in their hand. Whoa. And what does the brain do? We have our feelings, we have our thoughts, we have memory. There's a lot of stuff going on in here. And I hold it in one hand. And it just kind of hit me like a religious experience, especially later on, when I went home and thought about it, that it's also just matter. And it's very, very fragile, and it can break. And so I thought, it's probably a good thing to know what it is that we're trying to help, because most of us are trying to go into the healthcare field. And this is just the example of the brain. So to finish the story, all I could do is put the brain right back in, put the skull plate right back on top, and leave it all alone. And then the department chair asked me, where did you put that brain? I said, back in the body. Very pillow. That made it very, very relevant and made it very important. And so I kind of tried to approach anatomy from a perspective of like, we learn the parts of how does the body work. Well, we actually don't know how it works. We learn what the parts are in here. We learn how it works in physiology, which maybe I'll teach this summer, maybe I don't. I don't know that yet. But we learn how things supposed to work. And then when we go further in the studies, if you do nursing or radiology or physical therapy or whatever you do, then we learn how they work or not work. But if we don't know how they're supposed to work, it's very difficult to understand what's wrong when they don't. And so what we do in here is we try to figure out. Another experience I had was just last week in my practice. I practiced chiropractic on Pill Hill for Alta Bates, and a guy came in and he fell off his bike and hurt his shoulder 5 years ago, and said, I've been going to these people in Walnut Creek and they fixed it up initially, and then I've been going to the chiropractor, and I said, well, why are you coming to me? Well, my doctor wants me to come see you. And I'm like, well, what am I going to do different? What did the chiropractor do? She goes, oh, put me on the right side, put me on the left side, crick in the middle, and crick in the neck, left and right, and boom, and then I'm out of here. I'm like, and what about, you fell on your shoulder, right? What about the shoulder? Did they look at the shoulder? No. The massage therapist worked on the shoulder, and I got really mad, actually. Because I was like, well, here you go, my profession doesn't necessarily have the best reputation always. Because of that, you hurt a shoulder and you get your neck cracked. Well, it's part of the whole thing, but if you hurt your shoulder, you've got to look at the shoulder. And so, of course, I start palpating his shoulder. I go like, whoa, clavicle here, shoulder blade, scapula here. And then I compare it to the other side. It's not the same. It's way different. let's make it this side as close to the way that the good side is. And maybe that will help that person not be in pain. And of course, bingo, that helped the person not be in pain. I take my little hammer and what I realize is it's very, very important to know what's underneath the skin. Because we often don't know what's underneath the skin. Or we don't think what's underneath the skin. If you drop a car from 10 feet, you expect the alignment to be out, then you need to do something about it. If you have a person fall from 10 feet, you expect Vicodin's going to fix it. And it's, you know, I'm a chiropractor, so I'll talk chiropractic stuff a little bit. But that's just not the way it is. But it is, and somehow, when we put a skin suit on and we close it up, everything kind of gets mushy. And it's going to be a pill that's going to help us. Or we're going to have a pain and the doctor's going to tell us this or that. And so what I'm trying to do in this class is trying to teach you as much as I can about the human body and about how things work. And we include some physiology in it because it helps to kind of intertwine a few of these things. Of here, having some more knowledge, but also having some interest. And also having some curiosity. Because without the curiosity, just leave. It's not worth it. Because if you go to nursing, hell starts after that. At least that's what they tell you. When I went to chiropractic school, the first semester, like, oh my God, I can't do this. It's just too much. Upper semester says, just don't worry, it's getting worse. Like, oh no, please not. And so it got worse. And we got used to the getting worse. And then it's not worse because you get used to it and it's fine. And so this is going to be a very rigorous class. There's a lot of information. The way I like to teach is very hands-on. And so we're going to do a lot of lab stuff. First few sessions maybe not, but then after that. We have a lot of models here. We're very, very fortunate. We have a very good lab here. We have a lot of models. And I want you to get your hands on things as much as you can. A lot of us are very kinesthetic people. So sitting in the chair, writing down, and just reading a book. When I read a book, it goes. So I don't read the book. By the way, maybe you get to the book, I tell you what I do with that book. But I want you to be as curious as possible when you approach these things and not be afraid of the test and not be afraid of the yeah, of course we've got to do those two. And I give you all the tools I can give you because I come from a place of learning disabilities and test anxieties and getting a fever when I have to take a test and all of that. And I overcame that somehow. And it worked out somehow. It seems to be. But look at it from the eyes of a child. A child's brain is like taking in all the information they can. And that's what the child's supposed to do. Because they have to learn how to judge, how to put things in categories, and what is important, what is not important. And then when we're adults, some of us maybe become adults one day. I'm going to be 40 next month. Maybe that's going to be even interesting. You're an adult now, but I don't know. But you know, a child's eye has sort of that curious spirit in it. And so if you can, during the class, be as curious as possible and ask the why question. Why does that work? Not just, oh yeah, this is a heart valve. And, well, why do we have a heart valve? Well, that the blood doesn't go backwards. Oh, that makes sense. That alone will make you remember that there is a heart valve. But just learning that there is a heart valve is not going to, you know, do that. Sitting here, just listening to me,